If you're looking to stay informed with the latest analysis on the stories that are shaping our world in the areas of foreign policy, national security, and domestic politics, consider becoming a member of the DSR Network. With the DSR Network podcasts, stay ahead of the curve on global affairs. Each episode across our more than 10 shows features top experts, policymakers, and thought leaders who break down complex issues into digestible, engaging conversations. From breaking news to historical context, we cover the latest topics that matter most. Whether it's the intricacies of international diplomacy, the latest in national security strategies, or the dynamics of U.S. politics, the DSR Network has you covered. Members receive an ad-free listening experience, bonus content for virtually all of our shows, an invitation to join the DSR Slack community, enhanced show notes for select podcasts, and much more. Visit thedsrnetwork.com/buy and enter code JULY2024 to receive 50% off the regular membership price for the first year or first month. That's thedsrnetwork.com/buy and code JULY2024. Thank you very much for your support.
This is the Daily Blast from the New Republic, produced and presented by the DSR Network. I'm your host, Greg Sargent. On today's pod, we're going to tackle a subject of profound importance: the sheer inexplicable weirdness of the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. Our jumping-off point is Representative Matt Gaetz's bizarre speech in which his face was so taut and odd-looking that one Republican derided him as an AI sex doll. But there's lots more, from attendees wearing ear bandages to show solidarity with Trump after the assassination attempt, to the suggestion from at least one speaker that God saved Trump from that bullet. And it got darker and more despicable, too, with signs saying mass deportations now and chants of send them back about migrants and much more. Today we're talking about all this with the perfect guest, Ron Filipkowski, who runs Midas Touch News and who you know from Twitter, where he constantly posts videos of Republicans debasing themselves. We're going to try to find some meaning lurking underneath all this ugliness. Good to have you on, Ron.
Thanks. Happy to do it.
Ron, that Matt Gaetz speech was something else. Gaetz looked like he was in a wind tunnel. Here's what former Speaker Kevin McCarthy had to say about it.
You know, he looks very unhinged. I mean, a lot of people have concerns about him. And I'm not sure if he was on something, but I do hope he gets the help that he needs.
Now, Ron, McCarthy hates Gaetz, who deposed him as Speaker a while back, but he's kind of right. What's your reading of what happened here with Gaetz?
Yeah, well, first of all, the clip, when I first saw his face, I thought there was something wrong with my TV, like it has to be distorted in some way. And I just kept watching it. And then I clicked into different networks and I'm like, no, he clearly has done something strange to his face, whether it's Botox or whatever. So I think, the substance of his speech has been completely lost in the fact that all anybody's talking about is his face. But yeah, the feud with McCarthy is obviously ugly. I think he was surprised that McCarthy showed up at the convention at all, considering the fact that he's not especially popular with the MAGA base. And so, when he showed up, Gaetz goes over and gets in his face and starts yelling at him. McCarthy kind of accused him of being on drugs last night. He said, I don't know if he was on something and he's mentally ill and this and that. So it's been going back and forth. And then today, Derek Van Orden, who's the congressman from Wisconsin, Republican, who's a McCarthy ally, was the one who said he looked like an AI-generated sex doll. So, Gaetz really stepped on it last night.
People make fun of Van Orden, but I got to say that's a pretty good burn. Now, okay, let me ask you this, Ron. So you used to be a Republican and you switched parties after January 6th, right?
Yeah, I switched parties January 7th, 9 a.m. I was waiting for them to open the door to the registration office.
Tell us a little about that. What made you? What drove you over the edge? What made you come join the dark side, Ron?
I never voted for Trump. I was definitely a never Trump Republican. I voted none of the above in 2016. And in 2020, I made up my mind that I was just going to openly campaign for Joe Biden. And so I did a lot of stuff with, at that time, Republican voters against Trump, which is the Bulwark guys now, Tim Miller and Crystal and all those guys. Did some ads with them, some billboards, Republicans against Trump. But it was my intention to sort of either stay in the Republican Party or switch to independent after the election. But all the election fraud stuff, the Stop the Steal stuff, and then the capper January 6th, I sort of made up my mind, like, I can't sort of straddle the fence here and try and be in this middle Neverland that some of them are still in. And I needed to take a stand and take a side. And so I decided to switch to Democrat after that.
So now you post a lot of video of Republican craziness, which means you're really in the belly of this beast all the time. I want to ask you about Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene and others in that weird space. There's a type of MAGA celebrity that's really peculiar. It exists almost entirely online. It's very largely about who can provoke rage from liberals and the left most effectively. I mean, earlier this week at the convention, Greene dressed down a reporter in truly vicious and sadistic terms, blaming her for the attempted assassination, and Gaetz's entire shtick is owning the libs constantly. But Ron, at the same time, what they both kind of have in common is they try to oust House speakers largely for invented reasons, and sometimes due to substantive differences, and sometimes they have some success. What is this new MAGA celebrity exactly? How do you understand it?
The person who really coined the best term for this is Adam Frisch, who in 2022 was running against Lauren Boebert in Colorado. And Boebert then switched districts, so he's not running against her anymore. But back in 2022, he referred to her style, as well as Greene and Gaetz and others, as angertainment, which I thought perfectly fit because it's to stir up anger for entertainment purposes only, clicks only, and to get them, look, their ultimate goal is to get Fox hits, Newsmax hits. It gets them on TV, and that's ultimately the goal. Their goal is not to pass legislation. Their goal is not to spend lowering prescription drug costs or spend their day trying to make people's lives better. Their days exist to get on TV, to get noticed, to get attention, and that's what they do.
You're a shrewd observer of these people and their media habits. So I want to ask you this. On your point about them tailoring everything for the Fox News hit, the Newsmax hit, the viral tweet, the viral video, and so forth, this is sort of different from the Republican Party of the 2010s when they were making up lurid and crazy conspiracy theories about Barack Obama. In those days, they could actually oddly be more disciplined. Now you've got all these kind of freelance celebrity types going off in their own directions, seeking their own types of celebrity, seeking their own viral moments, and they all kind of end up, getting off message from each other. Isn't that something new? What do you make of that?
It is new, and it's new from 2021. It really, the origin of that, and I monitor right-wing and MAGA, the podcast world. The origin of that was them all getting kicked off off Twitter in January of 2021. And a lot of them had already been kicked off for their COVID conspiracies and vaccine conspiracies, but then tens of thousands of them were kicked off Twitter in 2021. And what happened is they went in and they created their own ecosystem. They got Rumble video came up, which is the right-wing YouTube. They created True Social, Getter, all these other alternative platforms that they got on, because also many of them were banned from Fox and Newsmax because of the Dominion lawsuit. So they had to find other alternative outlets, and that has resulted in this proliferation. That's why I say, like, they're not cancelable now because they've created their own ecosystem to where, they can't be banned anymore. And now, of course, they're all back on Twitter because of Musk. And this has also made the problem worse because now, before, when they would spew these crazy conspiracies and lies, they would get banned or suspended. But instead, now they get rewarded. because they get more clicks, more engagement, and Musk is paying them for their engagement.
Crazy stuff. We should say to listeners that we're recording this on Thursday afternoon before Trump's speech, so we don't know what he'll say. And we should also note that this hasn't been all craziness. J.D. Vance, Trump's running mate now, made some important political points in his speech Wednesday, laying out a new right-wing populist approach and so forth. Now, I think Vance is as craven and duplicitous a liar that exists in the GOP today, and his MAGA politics are absolutely reprehensible, from the selling out of Ukraine to the constant vile demagoguery about immigration. But I gotta say, he does give voice to the MAGA agenda and worldview in a way that very few of them do, especially Trump. He does it better than Trump does. What does that mean? What's your takeaway from Vance at this point?
That's a really good question. Obviously, because the question to me is really like, what does he really believe? Because I've spent a lot of time this week watching his old 2016 interviews and listening to him talking about his book and what he believed. And his message back then was that there's this white, rural, working class group of voters who are largely ignored by the elites of both parties, that Donald Trump figured out how to push their buttons and exploit them. He understood how to message to them, but at the same time was doing it in a very cynical way and offered no solutions. Now we have fast forward to the 2022 Senate primary, where J.D. Vance was in fourth place, polling at about 13% and was dead in the water despite Peter Thiel's money. And then he befriended Donald Trump Jr., and they became tight. Jr. got in his dad's ear. His dad ends up endorsing Vance, and next thing you know, Vance shoots to the top of the polls. So Vance, I think, clearly understood that he really had no future in elective politics in Donald Trump's Republican Party unless he completely repudiated everything he stood for before, rejected it, and fully embraced the MAGA agenda, which he did, and now that's resulted in him being very close to the vice presidency. So the question becomes, what does J.D. Vance really believe? If something happened to Donald Trump, would he, as President Vance, revert back to the 2016 Vance now that he's free of Trump? Or is this who he is now? We don't know that.
If you're loving this show, then it's clear you value unique perspectives on the issues shaping your world. That's why you should check out The Intelligence, the free award-winning daily news podcast from The Economist and its global network of correspondents. And with a subscription to Economist Podcasts Plus, you can also get access to special limited series such as The Modi Raj, a brand new show introducing you to India's enigmatic strongman, plus The Economist's suite of in-depth weekly shows on business, China, American politics, and tech, all for just a few dollars a month. Search for Economist Podcasts Plus to sign up and start listening.
Let's talk about another big Vance moment. His wife spoke. She has Indian immigrant parents. But at the same time, there were all these signs in the audience saying something like mass deportations now. There were also chants of send them back when Vance and others talked about undocumented immigrants and the border and so forth. What I take from that is that MAGA politics absolutely requires these massive displays of exclusionary cruelty and rage at outgroups like migrants. And that kind of steps on their ability to create feel-good moments that they could actually kind of legitimately create.
You're right. And here's what I can tell you, because I monitor the MAGA social media, as we've talked about. And Vance is clearly the guy that most of the MAGA influencers wanted. He was their pick. He was Donald Trump Jr.'s pick and all of them. Charlie Kirk. We could go all the way down the line. Jack Posobiec. They all wanted Vance. But I will say, if you monitor their social media, the one thing that a lot of them don't like about Vance is the fact of who his wife is, and that he has an interracial marriage. And I've posted some of their posts on social media that they've said about that. So it is ironic that they are so anti-immigration. However, both of the people running, Trump and Vance, have spouses who are the product of immigration.
It is pretty astounding. Let's talk about Nikki Haley's capitulation. I mean, she actually offered an incredibly forceful critique of Donald Trump during the GOP primaries, I think articulating a point of view that I would imagine that you share heartily, a real never Trump perspective. But then she completely rolled over and endorsed Trump in the most glowing ways possible. She spoke at the convention, and a bunch of right-wingers on Twitter thought they caught Trump mocking her during her speech. I think that's telling, Ron, because for Trump, the capitulation is the point. He never really minds when people who used to attack him come around. He likes it because it shows that he broke them. He dominates them now, right? Same with Vance. So, a lot of people have a grand old time tweeting all these quotes from Vance attacking Trump. Trump just looks at that and he says, I got him in my pocket now. He's my knee puppet.
Same with DeSantis too. And if yes, I mean, if you look at the clips, if you zoomed in on Trump's face when Haley was speaking, he was laughing at her to JD Vance. He was saying, I didn't want her here. She called, she insisted on speaking. I don't know why. Nobody here likes her. That's basically what he was saying to Vance, and they were just having a good laugh over it. The other notable thing is, so Vance and Haley and Ron DeSantis were both, of course, his main rivals and opponents during the primary, both highly critical of him. Ron DeSantis has not been photographed with Donald Trump in over 2 years. Think about that. He's the governor of Donald Trump's state. They haven't appeared in a photograph together in over 2 years. So he's there at the convention speaking. Does he talk to Trump? No. Is he photographed with him? No. Does he shake his hand? No. Same thing with Haley. So these are people who are coming in, Haley and DeSantis, for their own purposes, selfish. They're not there to really support Trump. They're there to support their own candidacy in 2028.
What do you think were the other ripe moments from the convention, Ron?
Oh, I thought that the Amber Rose thing on opening night was just bizarre. Amber Rose is Kanye West's former girlfriend who is militantly pro-choice, who promotes Satanism, who is an OnlyFans model, and Trump chose her to be the speaker to try and show that the party is now diverse, that the MAGA movement now has diversity. This, her appearance speaking on prime time and opening night really set off a firestorm on the right. I can tell you that virtually 90% of MAGA was infuriated that she was asked to speak. But this is part of Trump's new thing where he's surrounding himself with rappers. He's going to the Harlem Bodega. He thinks that these are things that are going to connect him, particularly to the black male vote, which he's really making a play for. And he thinks that his arrest, his indictment, and surrounding himself with people like Amber Rose and various rappers is going to help him get the black vote. I think he's completely wrong about that, but this is the play that he's making.
I will tell you, Ron, one of the weirdest things I've seen, and I've seen a lot of weird stuff in politics, was when Marjorie Taylor Greene was interviewed on TV talking about her moment of interaction with Donald Trump, where Trump kind of gently chided her and said something like, now you be nice to House Speaker Mike Johnson, right? And when she talked about that, I swear she looked totally transfixed. She had this weird grin on herself, like the God King, the MAGA God King had beamed attention her way. And it was so profoundly, deeply meaningful to her that you could just see it through the screen. She was an utterly transfixed figure. It was so bizarre.
Yeah, we see this with influencers all the time, whether it's Laura Loomer or Charlie Kirk or, on the right, is when they get a call or when Donald Trump posts about them on Truth Social, or cat turd, people like that. I mean, it's a big deal for these people, and it gives them a lot of street cred. It gives them credibility amongst their own tribe. It gains them social media followers. It gains them clicks. So, yeah, I mean, having Trump even just send you a happy birthday card is a big deal in that world. And I mean, the only reason why she does not like Mike Johnson. I can tell you that. And I talk to her boyfriend from time to time, Brian Glenn, on a fairly regular basis. We communicate. And, you know, I can just tell you, she does not like Mike Johnson, not for any ideological reasons, but because she got in tight with McCarthy. McCarthy elevated her, and you know, Mike Johnson was the one who took his spot. So that's the basis of her animosity, nothing policy-wise.
Look, I think Trump's going to be hard to beat, you know, this fall, especially if Biden stays in, although that's looking increasingly less likely by the second. I do think there's a path to beating him with someone other than Biden. But the bottom line is that when you look at a convention like this, you really just sort of see how much the Trump personality cult has captured the GOP and how that kind of exists in this weird alternate media universe. What's your ultimate bottom line on all this, on what you're seeing at the Republican convention?
Dissent is not tolerated in the Republican Party. It's been snuffed out. I mean, we saw it was still there in 18. It was where Republican. It was still there in 20. It was still there in 2022. But I think really after the 2022 midterms, when Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, I think it was 9 out of the 10 Republicans who voted to impeach Trump were voted out, were booted out of office. I think that that was really the end of the Republican Party as we knew it before, and it is now 100% the Trump Party. We've seen, look at what just happened with Bob Good. I mean, Bob Good is the chair of the House Freedom Caucus, one of the most conservative right-wing members of the House, but he endorsed DeSantis. That's all he did wrong. And Trump went out of his way to unseat him in that primary and did it. So if Donald Trump can unseat the chair of the Freedom Caucus just because he slighted him in a small way, that tells you that no dissent is tolerated, and I don't expect we will see any dissent until Trump is ultimately defeated.
It's really quite a spectacle, and I have a feeling that tomorrow, when this airs, it will look a whole lot worse because Trump will have spoken by then. Ron Filipkowski, thanks for taking us on this tour of the MAGA purgatory. We really appreciate it.
Sure, no problem. Anytime.
Folks, make sure to check out a couple new pieces we have up at TNR.com. Timothy Noah on the new Republican cult of William McKinley, and Susan Milligan explaining why Donald Trump's strongman image is actually a plus for many authoritarian-inclined voters. We'll see you all next week. You've been listening to The Daily Blast with me, your host, Greg Sargent. The Daily Blast is a New Republic podcast and is produced by Riley Fessler on the DSR Network.